I'd like to welcome all of you to our Building Resilience During Tough Times MS Can Do. My name is Dr. Ken Nowack. I'm a licensed psychologist and Chief Research Officer of Individual Learning, an external consulting firm, and really privileged to be part of the Can Do MS family of coaches and consultants. I wanted to share a personal story about the topic of resilience that really resonates with me, and probably one of the reasons as a researcher in the stress and coping and resilience area, I really was challenged very early in my life to think about why do some people going through life crisis, adversity, and challenge basically be pretty healthy and stable, and others tend to be pretty disturbed and broken down. And the story is about my father. And if you can imagine, if you know anyone or have a child of about 6 to 8 years of old, my dad's story is a pretty unique one in some ways, but one that does really allow us to take a look at how people do deal with adversity. When he was about 8, his mom and dad woke him up and actually put him on a train, telling him that he needed to leave the small town in Erkner, East Berlin, after the eve of Kristallnacht, when most of the Jewish families and businesses' homes were destroyed. And my father was hidden by a really great organization that still exists today in France for over 3 years, not hearing about family and parents, and finally wound up here in the United States in an orphanage in the San Francisco Bay Area, with most of his family not being alive and not having much communication. And my father, although passed away a few years ago, stayed in touch with all of the children that were in this orphanage and were also at the homes that moved around in France. And I got a chance to meet a lot of them. And many of them, again, were very psychologically healthy and physically well, and others really literally had a lot of challenges with their mental health and their physical health as well. So my dad's story is an interesting one because it really gave me the impetus to study who are the hardy. And today we're going to go on a journey very briefly to take a look at the topic of resilience and what that means for people in managing and dealing with MS. And we can't not talk about resilience without mentioning the stress response. This is at the root of what happens with all of us when we view life challenges and we make appraisals of work and life situations that are challenging in dealing with adversity. And our evolutionary response to stress is one that actually is adaptive. So I don't see stress as a bad thing, although chronic stress isn't something we're built to engineer. Think of a race car that's racing at 100 miles an hour nonstop. Something will break down, like the human body. We're geared in short bursts to protect ourselves from perceived harm and danger. We certainly could talk, if we had more time, about the neurobiology, our genetic predisposition for some of us being very hardy and being able to withstand quite a bit more life challenge. A lot of it has to do with our personality, how that develops, and personality is both a trait but also malleable. It does change over time. And today we'll focus a little bit more about what you can do in terms of actions, behaviors, and thoughts. It's more behavioral that gives the impetus for how you can enhance your ability to manage and cope with stress on a day-to-day basis. The topic of resilience is also academically really interesting because there are at least two different, very different ways of defining resilience. And I want to talk about both of these very briefly in today's presentation. One of the ways to conceptualize and measure and talk about resilience is to talk about it as an outcome. What happens to people over time. And again, to reference my dad as an example, that all things being equal, he was pretty psychologically and physically healthy, even having a childhood just fraught with fear and anxiety and hunger, and just really not knowing the next day if he'd be alive. So one of the ways to define resilience as an outcome is that it's really a positive adaptation. It's our ability to maintain psychological and physical health without any negative and adverse consequences when we do deal with life's challenges and life adversity. So this is one way of conceptualizing this. When we think about people like my dad, the question came to mind, and from a research of mine and others, what are the typical paths that people can follow? And I actually want to suggest that resilience is one of three paths, and I want to go over each of these really briefly. And one path is really what we would call harm. And this is a small group of individuals, maybe anywhere from 4 to 8% of individuals that experience really traumatic events and catastrophic events. And they can have pretty long tails, including post-traumatic stress, where we do have psychological scars from things that occur. The good news is this is not the majority of the paths that people follow, but indeed, all of us are a little different. And even a diagnosis of a chronic illness can really be pre-traumatic for many of us. And we hope, again, that we can move through this particular path and stage to two others that I want to introduce. The second stage is one that we call resilience. And in fact, we do find that in general, most of us have experienced lots of life examples of breakups and job losses and failures and just things that haven't gone well, loss of life of perhaps children, parents, relatives, friends, and even with disability, most of us will rebound and regain near normal satisfaction. So we see this as a fairly common but not unique path, and one that we'll be focusing on things a little bit later in this presentation that you can do to enhance your ability to be resilient in the face of work and life stress. And finally, there's one more path. Again, not quite as many people will follow this path, but we've actually seen in our own research and others as well that people can grow through life challenges. That old song about what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is a good euphemism that with a little bit of life challenge and adversity, we find that in the middle ground there, it really helps strengthen our coping skills. And sometimes even very severe situations really alters our priorities. It redefines who's toxic in our life, who we love, where we want to find slices of joy. And we refer to this as post-traumatic growth. And this is the third and final path that a lot of people do follow, not all of us. But I do want to be clear that resilience, when we define it as an outcome, does in fact have these three very different paths. Everyone's pretty individualistic, and some of us, again, will linger in this resilience mode and kind of get back to a bounce back to where we were. And some of you will actually be stronger and grow through your experiences. A second and very different way of defining and conceptualizing and measuring this particular concept of resilience is one I'm going to mention in a moment, but we did do some research in conjunction with the Multiple Sclerosis Society here in Los Angeles with a really interesting 12-week Living Well program, in which people met weekly for several hours, in which we looked at a wide variety of topics, psychoeducational, both in person and online, and some of the topics included stress management, eating nutrition. There was the in-live version of physical activity or exercise, and even a track we called spirituality, which was really about finding meaning and purpose. And what we found with several hundred folks over several years is that there were a small subset that not only improved, but dramatically and significantly grew as a result of participating in this program and managing and coping with MS. So it's a great example, again, of post-traumatic growth. But let me introduce a second definition and conceptualization of resilience. And this really refers to things you think about, things you do, and actions that you might promote your personal well-being and mental health. It's really the ability for you to adapt and, more importantly, to rebound from stress and challenge and adversity. I'd like to share with you 12 evidence-based techniques. Not each one will be relevant for each of you, but we have found my research and others and quite a bit of literature that each of these can in fact buffer the impact of stress on our mind and body and help us build some resilience. So one of those that possibly we know is really valuable in folks with MS that have the chronic fatigue as one of the symptoms, we find again that rest and sleep, the quality and quantity of sleep, is very important and growing in the research literature for enhancing our ability to withstand stress. Even a single night of sleep, we find a chronic increase of an inflammatory response. We also find an impairment in social skills, an impairment in cognitive functioning. And we all know that a night of poor sleep really tends to rock our boat and interfere with daily living. So one of the ways to really enhance the extent we can control sleep would be to foster good sleep habits, good sleep hygiene. And for those of you that are experiencing some sleep problems, if your primary neurologist and physician can't help you, some of the certified sleep centers across the country may be of benefit to think about. Are there bona fide sleep disorders, complications from medication, side effects of things that occur like fatigue as well, and pain and other kinds of MS symptomology that could be interfering. We also know that physical activity and exercise is a great drug. It's free, and at the end of the day, it not only has health benefits, but we find that the more we work out, it is equivalent to releasing a fertilizer in our brain that has a very sophisticated name called brain-derived neurotropic factor, or BDNS. And this is also enhancing cognitive functioning. So the more physically active you can be within your parameters of your symptoms of MS, we really do see this as a wonderful anxiety-promoting, anxiety-defeating technique for people under stress, and one that, if you make a regular habit of it, can be really beneficial as a stress management technique. It goes without saying that social support, this is an area of active research of my own, and both availability and the utility and the satisfaction components of social support are very important. And certainly I think all of you that have life partners that are working with you and helping you manage life, living well with MS, will really attest to the power of social support. Increasingly, we're finding that stress management and relaxation techniques, such as mindfulness meditation, increasingly are being found to one of my favorite studies conducted by David Moore at Northwestern University in just a moment, working with MS individuals, that does show some really interesting benefits. We also know practicing gratitude, finding slices of joy, waking up in the morning, going to bed, and thinking about something you're blessed to have can really put life and work stress in perspective. And it's one of those balancing techniques that helps us to really realize that we are in fact very blessed and gifted with a lot of positive things, even though we're dealing with work-life adversity and challenge. And this idea of post-traumatic growth is this idea of growing through adversity. It's finding meaning with the illness and situation you're in. It's looking at ways to really enhance your growth of redefining relationships, redefining commitments to work and hobbies that can be really lasting. Let me highlight one of these particular techniques out of the 12 that I'll introduce that we do have quite a bit of literature that really does suggest that practicing any one of these can be quite beneficial for enhancing resilience. And that's a study by David Moore, Northwestern University. And he actually worked with a large group, 121 individuals that were experiencing, relapsing, remitting MS. And he used a very sophisticated research protocol in which he took a group and actually followed them for 24 weeks. And he used two different brain imagery, very sophisticated brain imagery techniques to look at current and developing new lesions, as well as whether or not there's expansion of the lesions that were there. And he compared that to a waiting list control group, so a group that did not have this particular treatment. What he used was a pretty structured, comprehensive stress management technique, psychoeducation that included meditation, relaxation, and also included lifestyle habits, eating, exercise. And what was really interesting is he brought these people in at 8 weeks, 16 weeks, and 24 weeks, and didn't just ask people, how are you doing, but actually peered into the brain using two different, very different types of brain imagery. And what he found was at the end of the 24-week period, the study period, that there was a significant reduction in new lesions, and there was a reduction that was pretty dramatic in the expansion of any existing lesions. So without any kind of pharmaceutical treatment, the results of this particular study really validated that practicing stress management can be very beneficial with people with MS. And here's the PS of the study, and the thing, again, as a researcher, that's really got me kind of interested in why do we do things and how do we keep it up. So he brought people back 24 weeks after the study ended and did one final round of brain imagery. And what he found at that point was now active new lesions and expansion of existing lesions, and just about everyone at the 24-week period had stopped practicing the research protocol of the structured stress management therapy. So it is this idea of use it or lose it. The techniques I'm sharing with you are things you have to apply daily and not just once in a while for you to really have the benefit of enhancing resilience. Let me go over the last 6 evidence-based techniques, and certainly how we view things is really critical. Stress is stress, but our mindset and the way we reappraise it, the way we talk to ourselves, sometimes we're our own worst enemy, and thinking about things from a catastrophic perspective. Immediately we go to the very worst case scenario rather than a realistic scenario. Sometimes we just don't know the course even of a relapse that we have of what will occur. We also find in the research literature that people that are hopeful and optimistic, both in a trait way, they're just people that seem to have a set point of being a little bit more optimistic, fare better. And it makes sense that if you're an optimistic person, when stress occurs, you have less of a stress and cortisol and fight or flight response. We also find that people that have a sense of meaning and purpose not only fare better from a health perspective and are able to withstand stress, it actually is a pretty good predictor of life and overall mortality and morbidity. And I'll share a really interesting study with you to illustrate this particular one. We also know that setting goals, being realistic with that, and knowing when to quit sometimes is really beneficial. And one of the ways to build resilience is to set really challenging and personal goals that are more intrinsic. Define what's important to you in life rather than those voices of others that are really encouraging you to do things that maybe they'd like to see you do, but you don't resonate as much with those. It takes a lot of energy to hold on to things that other people have done that we're not able to forgive. And we do find, in fact, at a physiological level, that people that are able to practice forgiveness have a way of actually enhancing their immune response. And it's not to say to ever forget things that have been done to you that are abusive or cruel or mean, but again, to let go of that. It's a mindset, again, of not ruminating endlessly and feeling a sense of anger and anxiety and angst over what's occurred in the past. And finally, we also know that defining those things in life, whether it's work or non-work related, that you really have a passion for and you do well. We call these signature strengths. It's pretty solid research that if we can get you every week to think about doing things you really love, it puts, again, the daily week into perspective. And even if it's been a very challenging week, getting out and doing things that really get off on can be very beneficial for building and enhancing resilience. Let me show you one study just to illustrate number 9 here, finding purpose and meaning. It's one of my favorite studies done by Danner, who was at the University of Kentucky several years ago. And she used a population of Catholic nuns. What makes this study really unique is she was able to find the diaries of nuns several years ago before they went into the convent. And they had to write an essay to talk about what life was all about and what it meant to be spiritual and to want to become a nun and devote their life to the church. And what's interesting about this study is it's a great control group. Most nuns don't smoke and drink, they don't carouse. We have a real control over their lifestyle habits. And what they did is they analyzed the content of their diaries. And they were able to actually read every sentence, every word, and evaluate those based on content being positive affect, positive feelings, neutral and negative affect. And they found when they did that analysis that it was a striking predictor of health and, most importantly, longevity. And the happiest nuns actually lived on average 10 years farther and longer than the nuns that were writing a little bit more being a victim and being negative, and just found being a nun was an escape or a dreary life that they weren't very excited about. But those that were more pointed, that had meaning and purpose, and it can be very small, it doesn't have to be save the world, but it could be a meaningful purpose to be the best parent, the best partner, the best at what you do, is significantly related to enhancing resilience. So Deborah Danner's research is a real great illustration of all of us. The more we can really define what's important to us, both today and tomorrow, can in fact moderate the impact of stress on well-being. We also found in the same study I mentioned with the MS Society, with the Living Well program, that this idea of meaning and purpose, we measured through a 3-item scale. We call it the spirituality scale, but you can look at the items here. And again, what we found in several hundred individuals that have gone through the program over many years is at the end of the program, compared to a waiting list control, we see a significant increase in dealing with and managing life with MS that can bring some benefits of defining and redefining what's meaningful, what's important, those slices of joy each day for you, even if the symptomology can be quite disturbing. It's a real good illustration of our own practical research with an MS population of finding meaning and purpose in life. I want to kind of end my presentation to suggest that out of these 12 evidence-based techniques for enhancing resilience, not all of them will resonate with you. Not all of them will be one size fits all. So there's many things all of you can do, from very passive activities to service to others, to travel and fun, that really tie back to the kind of commitments and actions to help build the capacity under work-life adversity and challenge of being healthy physically and healthy psychologically. So I think I want to end today by really challenge you to think about, out of the 12, what are you currently doing? And perhaps what will you be doing a little bit more, or new actions that you can take today? And I will leave you with a great quote that really puts resilience in a perspective. The saying is one of my favorites. It says basically that things turn out best for those who make the best out of how things turn out. And for those of you that are interested in your own measure of resilience, I would refer you to this particular website. And once you go to it, you're able to take a 30-item, very brief resilience inventory that's well validated with over 18 years of research. And all you need to do is go to this website page and click on the upper right-hand corner that says sign up. And it'll be pretty clear instructions for how to take the resilience inventory. So thank you for joining me today, and we look forward to answering any additional questions you have through the MS Can Do Society.